Yeah, everybody looks chipper. Thursday morning. Welcome to build real-time software with ASP.NET SignalR. Very early, so things will be flying by in real time, really early. So, I am Rachel Appel. I work here at the Borg. I write things about ASP.NET and things, and I drink and I know stuff. Basically it. So you can find me out on the interwebs. If you go to my personal website, it gives you every piece of information and more that you need to know about me. So you can get anything from any talk or any tech stuff that I do. So you can look for me there. So today, we'll see what SignalR is all about. Do the good old overview. Where do we get it? Then what do we do with it? The what do we do with it part is kind of three major areas: these hubs, these connections, and then, of course, eventually, shipping is a feature. And so we have to deploy the product at some point, unless you're Google. Right? Then it's beta forever. Oh, did I say that out loud? I did. We're recording it too. How do you like that? So this will be our basic look at SignalR today. And it'll give you a nice start to finish overview. You should be able to get started in writing some apps. We won't have time to get into like huge things like server farms and scaling out and all kind of fancy things like that, but you certainly can do all of that stuff. So you could come up after the talk and I could point you to resources if you need to do things like that. What we'll do here is just the basics of learning how to use the product and get it integrated with your current software or new software. It's always more fun if you get to do new software instead of maintenance software. But we don't always get to do that, so we'll look at both. So what is this thing? It's been out for a while, a couple of years now. Version 2, this is kind of interesting. Microsoft has this reputation for the version 3 product as being that nice, good, shiny product. SignalR actually, kind of right out of the box, was very good, very stable. Even though it's technically at version 2 now, you don't need to wait for version 3. It's a very small, focused set of libraries, which is what I'm all about. For as much as I like JavaScript and do that development, some of these JavaScript frameworks, you gotta say, they're getting a little ridiculous. Right? They literally come with the kitchen sink in them and everything that you don't need. I'm more of a person of small focused libraries that do one thing and one thing well. I would rather pick 10 of those to get 10 features than one library that has so much stuff in it that's not going to be useful and only get in the way and not make it easy to maintain. So all of that is kind of taken care of. Damian Edwards, his tagline for this is incredibly simple, real-time web for .NET. And that's it. Simplicity was a big deal because we know things are not always simple in software. And as a matter of fact, the few times that they are, we're developers. We will make them complex. It's what we do. Reach. We're kind of big in the cross-platform now. You may have noticed. We like Linux because we're Microsoft. So reach, cross-platform reach is very important. Nobody really, maybe 3 people, are on just a single platform. And whatever platform they're on, they're like the fan person for that platform. So, even Microsoft employees, we don't use 100% Microsoft products, no matter how much Kool-Aid we drink. It just, I have an Android device, I have a Mac. I didn't show it off in public today, but I have one. I'm a closet Mac person. So reach is important. Cross-platform is important. A lot of people are developing not just full stack, but full stack across the stacks. It's like stacks all the way down with some development. So we got to reach all those devices, even the BlackBerries, Windows Phone, even our own phones, we have to reach. And it has to work well, has to perform. because this is a real-time set of libraries. So we'll talk about what real-time means, but as a hint, it means kind of fast and right now. So performance is kind of important if you need things to be fast and real-time. So those are like the key goals for SignalR. SignalR is part of ASP.NET. It's part of the family. And we could go and get it separately and then just use it in the ASP.NET stack. Comes with a set of libraries. We'll see a set of server libraries that we use, and then client libraries, such as a JavaScript library, because everybody supports JavaScript, but also specific small targeted libraries for Android, iOS, or desktop development as well. And by using this small package of libraries, we can create what's called a real-time persistent connection over HTTP. And we'll actually kind of run roughshod right over ASP.NET, even though we are ASP.NET. And we'll see how it does that as well. So it integrates nicely, but kind of also skirts around some of ASP.NET because of the underlying technologies. So these are simple, small libraries so that you can add real-time functionality to an app or website. Maybe it's just a little piece. Maybe you have something like a dashboard, or maybe the whole app needs to be that. SignalR came about from the open source movement, not just the fact of needing this kind of library for real time, but when this little thing came, Owen came out. Open Web Interface for .NET. We like standards. We actually like making standards a lot. Yeah, we follow them. And Katana. So once in a while you'll see these words, Owen and Katana. For the purposes of this talk, you'll see it once in a while, and we know that it's kind of the underpinnings of what helps SignalR be architected the way it is. So you don't need to go into the depths of all this. Just kind of know it's there, know where to get the info from it. Specs are just that, they're specs. Most of us, unless we have insomnia, don't visit the W3C unless we can't sleep or have a problem, right, or both. So the same kind of thing here, but you will see the terms. It is kind of the underpinnings for this. And also for .NET Core. At some point it kind of evolved into that. And then we don't see the terms Owen so much after that in Core. And then before I go any further, this is still ASP.NET 4.6. So this doesn't work on .NET Core yet. It will, just not today. Not tomorrow either, actually, but a few months. We're hopefully November, but it's not any kind of promise. It's not my pay grade to be able to promise anybody anything here. So why would we use it? Well, we're developers and we can. Other than that, the boss doesn't like that justification I found over the years. Well, we can. Okay, fine. So games. Popular games. There may be a popular game that uses similar technology out there now that I see people out hunting. Like, people have not hunted in packs since we, lived on the plains and had to hunt for food, like the way I saw over in Bellevue Park yesterday. Except we're hunting like little creatures that don't even exist. It's kind of weird. So games is a big deal, real-time games. Leaderboards, of course, goes with games, but even if it's not, you just have to know, maybe a sales leaderboard, right? But could also actually be a game, depending on your company. Social applications. If people don't get that notification from Facebook right away, somebody liked my stuff, people want that. So social applications, real time. Business collaboration. Management wants this in real time. I'm not sure developers want this in real time. We want to go hide. But business collaboration, stocks, obviously stocks and chats. That's kind of classic real-time software. Dashboards, auctions, anything that needs live data, fast data, that kind of stuff. Actually, anything that doesn't. If you just want to put a fun little widget somewhere, you have maybe a company dashboard, but you just want a little widget that updates something by the moment. You don't have to redo the whole program. You could just make yourself a little widget and stick it in there. So it's kind of nice that you could do that kind of thing. You don't have to redo the whole project. So really, anything that needs live data, and sometimes even if it really doesn't, but it might be a fun, nice thing for the users. You think about it, a lot of our social networking apps really don't need to be real time. You could wait and see if somebody likes your post. But you know, we're humans and we want to see now. So where can you use it? Like everywhere, and then more. So obviously HTML and ASP.NET. Anything that has JavaScript, which is anything. Raspberry Pi, right? You run it on Raspberry Pi. You run full ASP.NET on Raspberry Pi. I love 2016. Windows Store, Windows Phone. That's funny. Android, iOS, like anything, right? There is a client for it. If you could find some weird platform that's not supported, try us. We'll see if we can do something. But generally, if you support JavaScript, and I can't think of anything that doesn't, then you definitely are supported. So if you want to see it in action, I know nobody's online now. Usually when I give these talks, it's not so early. They don't drag me out of bed so early. But I'll go to jabber.net, which is the canonical chat application that the SignalR team made. And they hang out in there. So I encourage you to go troll them all. I usually do, but I know they're not going to be in there right now. You just go sign in and you tell them I said to go troll them. And Shooter, which is a game that I lose every time I play. It's basically asteroids. Remember old asteroids? That was awesome. I love Atari, right? It's fantastic. A little SignalR game, so as some samples. But I have some samples too. And you can even follow along with these. I'll show you how they work first really quick and then give you a link. So maybe I wanted to allow people to vote for their favorite company. And I have this Edge user over here. And then I have this Chrome user on the right. And as they vote, I want to tally in the real-time votes. Somebody comes in and clicks, and as you can see, as I click in one, it'll update the other, which is really cool. And this is not like Julia Child stuff. This is, you know, actually hitting the cloud. The cloud. Azure cloud. So if you want to try this, go to this, bit.ly. Bit.ly, and it's case sensitive, SignalR voter. And then you can vote as well. Oh, there we go. Oh, people like Microsoft. Yes, because you're here. We won't kick you out if you vote for something else, I promise. I may harass you, but I won't kick you out. Oh, nobody likes Twitter. Okay, there's a couple. There we go. So once in a while, we get Shenanigans attendee who writes a script to click the buttons. That's always fun if anyone wants to do that. It's just a demo. It doesn't hit any databases or anything. So yes, Microsoft, we're doing it. See, because of SignalR. That's why everybody likes it. All in real time. I promise I am not running magic scripts here. This is you people doing this, right? Nobody wants to fess up, fine. So that's what you can do with it, which is really cool. Actually, just to sit there and watch the little tallies is really cool. So we'll take a look at that sample and how to get it up and running. And if you follow to my website and through to GitHub, it's actually up there. So you can download this and play with it yourself. So if we want to get to SignalR in Visual Studio, just go to 3dubs.asp.net/SignalR. Pretty easy. You can also do it as a NuGet package, because we like the NuGet. It's the candy store. That will put in those. You'll see little references that have the word Owen in it, and you'll see SignalR as well. So that's kind of where that reference comes from. You can also go directly to GitHub and download it. I kind of like that. You go to GitHub, you not just download it, but you can actually see the source code. I love that kind of thing. I love the open source Air at Microsoft anymore. I can just go look at the code very easily. Of course, working here, it's kind of easy, but when you're not, if you're not an employee, you can't just look at the code, right? It's private, but now it's not because it's open source. So everything that ASP.NET does is open and you can participate. You can give feedback, you can even do pull requests. So when I go to NuGet, and what I'm going to do is just grab the top level SignalR package. That will pull in a couple other packages for me. One called System Web, because we like that term. SignalR core components doesn't have anything to do with ASP.NET Core, just core components. And the JavaScript client. Now you'll also see some other NuGet packages like Owen stuff, some things for going a little deeper than the level we would go here, and also the .NET client. If I wanted to, say, build a WPF or WinForms, people still do that. Like, serious, people still do that. It's kind of big, desktop apps. So if I want to put this in a Windows form app, there's a client for that even. So if I go over to Visual Studio, just run in here and grab NuGet, then somewhere up in here, SignalR will show up. Gotta love conference Wi-Fi. Yeah, so now mine is actually already installed, but I had upgraded from other versions. But it would normally have the green check. And you can see the .NET client, also JavaScript client, System Web. So anything that's marked as, ours, and it looks legit like it's ours and it's SignalR, it's probably good. So pretty easy to obtain. Once we do that, you'll see in the references, and let me bring up my little zooming tool, the one I like. Let's see. There we go. So you'll see in here, here's where you see the Owen stuff, right? That'll just come with SignalR, and you'll also see stuff that actually says SignalR. And so once you put in those references, that's what you get. So when you see the .Owen stuff, don't go and delete it. Right? SignalR needs that. Also, at this point, this should go away. There is, we'll see with the JavaScript client, a dependency on jQuery as well, which could go either way depending on how you feel about that. But it's not really a pain to deal with or anything like that, just that it's there for now on the client side. For now, what we're going to do is start on the server side, write some code, and then work our way back to the client. So once we have it up and configured, we need to start it up. Now this will change a bit. As we move into .NET Core, we actually still have this startup class. We still have a configuration method. We may see this in here, but there's also configure services and a few other methods. It should be in there somewhere. But for now, before we go to ASP.NET Core, just in regular ASP.NET, we do need to tell it. Even though we're pulling down the SignalR package and we're going to use it, and it is ASP.NET, we still need to tell ASP.NET that this piece of it is going to come in here and work. So here's where we need to tell it a couple of using statements. And we do need a class called startup with a method called configuration. And in there we call app.mapSignalR. It passes in an IApp builder. If I come in here and mark this with the assembly tag and tell it to make it an Owen startup, and this is just my naming as SignalR3, right? Just whatever namespace you want is fine. But as long as you have a class called startup and it calls app.mapSignalR, that signifies ASP.NET. That ASP.NET proper is going to allow SignalR to do some work, and it's going to kind of hang back and let SignalR do it. Once we put this in our project, then SignalR can start up and can start working. So in here somewhere I should have a startup. And in this case, so depending on what version you're in, you may or may not have the app start. But somewhere you need a startup class. the physical location is not as important as the fact that you have a startup class. And then here I have the configuration. In this case, because I've upgraded this actually even from 2012, I don't even, oh, nope, there it is. I was going to say, depending on what version, you can actually have Visual Studio put that for you so you don't need to type it, but it's fine. It's up here. So now that I have this, I have my packages, have my startup, we're pretty much ready to start writing SignalR code. Almost ready. We need to kind of see how it works. We saw the setup. And real quick, namespaces and big links that are not SEO'd. That's the SignalR site, or you just Google with Bing, SignalR namespaces, Microsoft.aspnet.signalr instead of the system.web stuff. All right, so it's a little off to the side as far as namespace goes. And then how it works. So the central kind of concept with SignalR, we have this thing called a hub. And it sits on the server. It's a server-side part of the library. Gives you resume buzzwords like full duplex connectivity. Right? Yeah, you put that on your resume immediately after writing your first app with this. In the Microsoft.aspnet.signalr namespace is the hub class. It's a nice class. It's what I really like about this. Tiny class, just a handful of methods, and that's it. All right, it's not a, like 500 classes with 7,000 methods. Nope, little tiny thing, does a little tiny thing, does it well. This sits here in the middle, like you might expect a hub to do. And this hub is going to host that like real-time centralized code. And from it, we might have some random client that connects, maybe a desktop. Anyone still use a desktop? You'll actually see them around campus, yeah. Sometimes you need the power. So maybe desktop, maybe a laptop. It's kind of an old laptop. That's definitely an old ThinkPad on the bottom, I think. Or your Surface, a Windows phone. Mystery clients, whatever, right? Android, iOS, weird web TV, whatever. I had to support one of those once. All of these, and they all talk. You see the arrows go both ways. Oh, this is interesting. So they all talk to this hub. We normally think about how HTTP works. We have the request-response cycle. We're all used to that. The client would initiate an HTTP request to the server. Server gets the request, says, all right, let's serve up a page, run some stuff in the background maybe, send down that stream of data. Once the client gets the full stream, there's a disconnection. Right? This is not a live connection, or we wouldn't need SignalR. So you have that disconnection, and the client knows nothing about the server at that point, and the server knows nothing about the client unless you do something like put session state in there. And technically, they still don't know it's you. That's you doing something. So that's the really only way to connect those two, right? Is that with session state or cookies or something like that, right? So generally, it's request, does stuff, response, clean cut, right? Go your separate ways. So the arrows go one way, then it goes the other way. In this case, what happens, instead of one arrow going one way and one going the other way, we get one arrow that goes both ways because we create a pipeline over HTTP. And this allows that full duplex connectivity, which means that not can the client just connect and make that request and expect a response, but then once it's done that first time, the server can then nag the client to death. Yes, so the server can, that hub can then just send stuff to the client as long as it's connected. And even if it's not, it can still try to send stuff, and then you can see if it's received, etc. But it can do that. So it's two-way connectivity. So it opens a pipeline. And it does it so that this can happen in real time. So you don't have to wait for the request, stuff, response. It's magically immediate. So you see when you click those voting buttons, it happens really fast. Now the interesting thing with that, I had 2 clients. Kind of almost could look like, if those were messages, that those clients are talking to each other directly. We can make it look that way. What we could do is have those clients that have the full duplex connectivity on either side of the hub pass through the hub to talk to other clients. And it'll still happen in real time. Now that's pretty cool. So essentially, you can mimic peer-to-peer networking. You're going through the hub, but for the intent of the user, and for the most part, even programming, it's almost transparent, which is pretty awesome. You can't do that in HTTP, right? You have to send stuff to the server, wait for the other client to make a request and get the data. Now, the ways around this with HTTP is WebSockets and some other things that we'll talk about, which may or may not be some of the underpinnings of SignalR. So that's a nice setup. I like that. And it's a very simple way to do things. Right? Just have your hub in the middle. Everybody rallies around the hub. You have reach. You have performance. And I promise it's easy when we see the code. So you take this hub, and in .NET fashion, it's a class. I know, shocking. And you declare, what you do is you just take this class, put it in your project somewhere, and start making public methods on it. That's it. And if you do MVC, you think about a controller. It's a class with a bunch of public methods hanging on it. Except that participates in the request response cycle at some point. Now, off of each hub, all of those little connected clients are collected in a client's collection. Right? And that lets you trap and watch and manage all of those clients that are connected. Then what you can do is once you have that connection, you can actually call code directly on the client. I'll say that again. You can call code, JavaScript code, from your C# code. From your C# code on the server, you can call JavaScript on the client. Yeah, try that in just plain old HTTP request response. You can't. You got to do WebSockets or something. So we'll see how to do that in a second. But that's like magic, right? It's not something we normally do as web programmers. With this, we'll also see these little namings that we have, so we can match things up nicely between the client and server. So let's take a look at this. So I have hubs. Now in my project, it's just a small one. And so I just put it in the root. You'd probably want to organize a little more. This is a tiny project for demo purposes. So I'll take my hub. It's called Vote Hub. So it's just a class. Inherits from this hub. Now, if I go to the definition for the hub, all right, so it implements iHub. You'd expect it to implement something at least, and iDisposable, of course. And you look here, I get those clients. I get the context, and if you're familiar with EF, it's like a connection, right? Conceptually. Groups, we'll talk about groups later. I could group all that. Stuff you would expect. Connected, disconnected, reconnected. Dispose. So small, look at that. What is that, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I actually have to count them out. It's still early. Like 8 members. That's small, but it does a lot. I like that. Small does a lot. Bang for the buck. So that's our definition of hub. So what I want to do is whenever somebody clicks that vote button, I want the client to just call directly to this code on the server. So that's where I declare a public method, which is literally just plain old C# code. That is it. Like, so not fancy, it's not funny, right? Couldn't be any more plain, just a public method. And then I pass in the ID of which one of those buttons were clicked. Then inside of here, I just do my own private stuff. All right, so add vote. I tabulate the votes in a private method. And just for the demo of it, because I'm not using a database, or anything like that. I just made it static in this case. It doesn't have to be. So that's all I did, was just to tabulate the votes, see if somebody had already voted. So the private stuff is just your own code, not necessarily SignalR related. The public method is what we're interested in. And then the only other stuff I have in here is the connected, which we'll talk about that later. So we're talking even with extra spaces and somewhat bad formatting, my code, right? Like my other code. 50 some lines, which is not bad for that little program. Right? So now they have this hub. You can even put a breakpoint here and see what happens. If I go ahead and run this, now of course when I'm running it locally. It's not hitting that cloud app. If I go ahead and run, I love that lag when you first click F5. It takes it an hour or two. Eventually it'll show up. There we go. So I click a button and it makes a call to the server, and so that's the JavaScript. We'll come back to this in a minute, so you know there is JavaScript happening on the client, right? And that is in my default.js. Click continue, and here we are on the server side. Right? So you see I did start in the client. It went directly to here. All right. Now, if I do have, this is an MVC app as well, so I do have controllers, but I was not I could tell it to go to a controller, but that would be a regular HTTP request. So you can mix and send, you could do an AJAX call to somewhere instead, or call other code. But when it comes to SignalR, you just call directly to this method, which is kind of cool. And then it just goes through its thing and tabulates the votes, and then off we go. We have a vote. As you see, the server side's pretty easy. It's just setting up a hub that inherits from hub, and public methods are what accept those calls. Now you can, of course, secure all this. Just being a demo, I didn't secure it so anybody can, so you wouldn't have to log in and create a username or account. Because we love creating an account for every site you have to visit. So fun. So at the hub events, you have on-connected, disconnected, reconnecting. Now you'll have a set of these for both the hub and when we get to the client, on the client as well. So the hub is what you could tell, from your central location on the server, who's connected and how to manage those clients, maybe put them in groups or do whatever. And when this happens, the best way to do it is when they first connect, grab their connection ID and store it somewhere, right? Maybe in memory or something like that for a while. So you can monitor while they're actually connected. By the same token, when we get to the JavaScript side, you can actually see, you can let the user know if they go in a tunnel or something. You could pop up a little thing, hey, bad connection. So you can also have it on the client side so that they could both tell. The server could tell when the client's offline, the client can tell when it can't reach the server, and then we can notify the user or code in the background. So here's that context. So hubs.context or hub.context. And from that you get the connection ID, and you can see exactly which connection happened. So in here, what happens is, somebody did it. Or somebody is just clicking and not even paying attention. One of the two. So if I actually open a brand new, say, browser or even a phone client, I could do it on my phone, but you won't actually see anything. It's kind of small from this vantage point. Somebody wants to come in and vote now. Oh no, I missed it. Everybody else was voting. Oh, look, it actually picked up where we left off. Right, so you can join in halfway. So that's what I was doing there. So when I did that, I'm actually calling to the clients to see what's happening. And I don't even get their ID in this case, but here's where you would normally do that. But for the purposes of this app, I'm using the onConnected to kind of catch the last client up to the rest of them, right? So they know what's going on. So if more join in, they'll know exactly where the vote count is. I love when people do that. So the hubs, a little bit more on the hubs and how, like the magic underneath, which is cool. Like, so you could hear the magic underneath today, and then you could forget all of this tomorrow, and it's still not going to affect your development, more or less, for 90% of what you do. Kind of don't expect people to remember anything I say 5 minutes after I say it anyway. So there's that. Anyway, hubs need something to make all this happen, right? Because it's not that HTTP request response cycle. I mean, it starts off, you need a request, but then after that, just all bets are off. So what we do is we make that first request, HTTP, which runs on TCP. It connects to the hub, and then it opens a pipeline. You can go read about it in RFC from 2011. The transports were standardized. Again, it's insomnia, W3C kind of stuff. Can't sleep? Go read this. You probably won't need to otherwise. But they use what's called transport negotiation, also a fun resume buzzword, to be able to figure out, if I go way back, that's not that far back, where is it? There it is. So you go way back to here and you think about these clients, right, and what's happening. We need to track these, different kind of clients and who's on and who's off. And those different clients, right, they might be Windows Phone. It might be somebody with a Dell desktop from 1994 that's still trying, like my dad, right? Still trying to hold on to that thing because he paid money for it and does not want to throw it away. And nobody wants it. So you have to figure out, here's code you would normally have to write that you would hate writing that is written now for you. It's called infrastructure code. Nobody wants to write IIS except my friend on the IIS team. Other than that, like, we don't want to do that. We don't want to have to write infrastructure code. We want to solve business problems. So we need to be able to tell, is this Android and what does it support? And is that Windows Phone? Is this a new client? Like, what can I do? Does it actually support real-time connectivity? Can it actually participate in our little party? So we have transports. Now, the gold standard is WebSockets. Anyone do WebSockets programming? Yeah, my apologies. It's WebSockets, right? So WebSockets, it's really the only true, for true believers. So say we all. Two-way connection between that client and server. So when we can't get WebSockets, when that last web TV person logs on to your site. Anyone remember that, web TV? That little failed product of ours. It's so cute. If they log on with like a super old device and you still have to support it, and some of this might be IE8. Yeah, I know, a lot of us have to support that still. That would be one of them. If it can't, if it doesn't support WebSockets, then what do you do? All right, do you just kick them to the curb? Do you not care about those users? Some developers don't. Usually I'm paid to care about them, so I do. So then what do? Well, we have to figure out a different transport for them to use. So when clients connect, if it can at all use WebSockets, it will. If it can't, then it'll go to, say, server sent events, or AJAX long polling, or good old forever frame for the red-headed stepchild that is IE8. And that's called transport selection process. Now what we could do is, you just go into your browser and do your F12 tools and stick in this little JavaScript logging piece. And we'll actually see this coming up in a second too. And I tell it to go and, hey, tell me what's going on here from the client side, and it'll actually tell you if you're using WebSockets or not. Now, if you're using Edge or Chrome and it's a newer version, you should be fine. But it's really the older stuff, or maybe an older phone or an older BlackBerry, something like that, that you might not have to, or might not be able to use WebSockets. So we need something else. Now this is the algorithm that makes that happen. Yep, memorize it now. No, just kidding. Yeah, notice first thing it does is like, are you IE8? Yes, go away. No, really. It says go use long polling then, and You know, all right, then, so you did that. What's next? You do JSON P. Is it cross-domain, core support? Like all this stuff you got to think about. This is what you would have to write if you were creating a hub yourself. But this is what the SignalR team wrote. And you can go on GitHub and look at all of this code. If you download this deck, the little links over here, this graphic comes from Stack Overflow. So it was the little flow chart somebody did up of the process that SignalR uses to determine each individual client and what their capabilities, their best capabilities are. And then it negotiates that. It links them with that with the pipeline. The thing I like is that that's code I don't have to write. I can instead solve real business problems. But this infrastructure is taken care of for me. So you know it's there, but you don't need to generally know the details of the algorithm unless you have a problem, and you're generally not going to. And if you are, you're probably making pull requests to the repo anyway, right, at this point with the SignalR team. So we actually saw that demo. So now that we see kind of how the hubs work, and then also you get to put, you know, transport negotiation on the resume as well, because you know what that is now, right? See all the raises I'm getting everybody in this room, right, in your next job? So on the client, let's take a look at client JavaScript libraries. So here's, for now, that hard dependency on jQuery. It's not bad. You don't actually have to use jQuery otherwise. So if you don't like it, I'm like just a JavaScript person myself. Not that I haven't done jQuery. JavaScript's fine for me. But just put in your scripts render or just a script tag. It doesn't matter how it gets in there, right? But it does depend on jQuery, so you do need jQuery. Then we need these references. So we need one to SignalR, right? And you see it has jQuery.signalr. There's a regular and a minified. Obviously, for production, you want the minified. And like any other script that you have, it can participate in your management of minification and bundling and all that other good stuff if you're using that in ASP.NET. So I put in this reference, and that has to be the first one after the regular jQuery reference. Then the second one, not a typo, you put in this funky little looking script tag, and it does the ~signalr/hubs. Not hubs.js. It's not a JS file, just a path. So what this does, once the hub spins up and a client first connects, it sends these scripts, and that hubs creates a proxy. Oh yeah, one of those. We're .NET people. We use proxies. So what it does is just makes this cool little proxy, and that helps with the pipeline. It connects that JavaScript side of the pipeline to the C# side of the server. We do have to have these references in, and it does have to be in that order. Okay. Once we have our references, we can then start making connections on the client side by just referencing $.connection. We could connect to multiple hubs this way and stick them in a little variable, little JavaScript variable, keep that on the client. So you're not limited to one hub per project or anything like that. So you can hit these connections. And the cool thing is JavaScript, being JavaScript, so flexible, that little connection has a lot of good staticky stuff that we can just get to without having to worry about proper instantiation and all that. Now here's where this other little thing comes into play that I'm just going to briefly mention. It's called the persistent connection. Now generally we're staying up at the standard usage level of SignalR. But if for some reason you need to go off the beaten path, right, so this would be like the 10% edge case stuff, not the 90% most of your day-to-day work stuff. If for some reason you need to go down towards the WebSockets level, but you don't want to go all the way to WebSockets, right? So it's like Dante's Inferno and you're just going to another level. Persistent connection is down there, maybe around 5th, right? So 7th is just WebSockets. So the persistent connection is available. We're not going to talk about it in here you'll see the term once in a while, and just to know if for some reason you have an edge case that requires you to go under the covers, that is the thing that you use to do that. We're not going under the covers today. We only have like an hour and some. So with that, we're just going to use the hubs level. So hubs, persistent connection, and then WebSockets, right? And then you're in that tunnel you can't get out of. So I mentioned before, you can do hub to connection, connection to hub, right? It goes both ways. Connection to connection, client to client, through the hub, of course. But you can also single out connections as well. You can group them. Really, it's almost like being on a LAN, right? As far as the usage of it, the end user, and somewhat for developing as well. There's a nice little post about the connection lifecycle and when things time out, right? So you'll have, of course, you have your server timeouts and stuff like that, but you can set up some of the timeouts and whatnot and check out the details of the lifetimes at this particular link, right? Because after a while, eventually stuff's going to just disconnect, right? Someone will reboot their phone or go out of range or shut down a computer, or the server, does its 20-minute memory flush for session, stuff like that. And we can also manage that. There's some details at that link. So let's take a look at these clients. That client's property, let's go right into the code here. So back on my hub here, I had that vote method in my hub. And in here is where I call the client. So if I look, it's the client's property of the hub. And from clients, you get a whole bunch of cool stuff. Client with an S. There we go. All right, so I can do clients.all, clients.caller, clients.client, groups, others, other in groups. Look at all this cool stuff in here. I like this. There's one that basically is like, I want to send a blast out to like everybody but you, that kind of stuff. So you can determine, do you want to, from the hub, single out one client and send a message? Do you want to just blast to all connected clients? Do you want to do a group? So if you go into that Jabber app, you'll see chat rooms, right? So each chat room would be a group. And then you could blast to the group, or you could, single out a client. And it's from the hub, but of course, other clients can connect and tell the hub, blast to everybody, or, just send to this client or that one. And that's all from the client's property of the hub. So in this case, when one person votes, we want all of the clients to update the results of the votes. And then in here, I'm passing in the ID of whichever one of those buttons were clicked and how many votes it has. So it sends a little note up, hey, I voted, and then the hub blasts to everybody, hey, this client voted, everybody update your JavaScript, your UX. And here in the onConnected, similar, but just a little different. Because it's the onConnected, I don't want to blast to everybody. I just want to pick out that one, just that one client. So in this case, the one that's specifically the caller. So clients.caller. And here's where I do this little join voting, right? So that's when somebody's catching up and they're late to the voting party. And then I just have a list of all the stuff for it to fill in the UI. So when I popped up that Firefox browser later and joined in voting, stuff still going on here? That's awesome. So that's what that does, right? So it just gives a list of the items. And there's so many more. So you have clients caller, and there's even more than is on the slide, right? Clients.others, right? Everyone but you, yeah. Sorry? So what do you mean by request, just a standard HTTP response? Well, then you're not using SignalR. So you can't. I'm not sure.
Could the method have a return value?
Oh, return, yeah, I do that. Oh, like an actual return value. No, you're just going to call the client and send data, not an actual return value like that. As a matter of fact, these are probably all void, right? Yeah, I was going to say they should be all void. Your private stuff, yeah, but no, not for, you don't return, you send data to it. Yep, that's, yep. So no returns, just sending data. Clients, a group, so the grouping. I only have this one line, but you do clients.groups.add, clients.groups.remove, collection management, standard issue collection management, add, remove, count, all that stuff you expect. And then the groups, the group name. Now in this case, instead of voting, this would be the name of the JavaScript function, send message on the slide here, and message instead of the return, I would send that data down that way. Here, if I do a specific client, here's where I could get that connection ID, or I may have trapped that in a variable instead at some point. But as you see, it's just all calling the same JavaScript, but figuring out which client you want. And there are several other options as well, but these are some of the most popular ones that we have. So once we do that, then we can trace it back to the client. So let's go look at the clients, get some of that JavaScript code in here. So, oh wait, scripts, it's kind of where we put the JavaScripts. Here we go. So inside of, so you see the HTML for it, it's nothing fancy. I just go through, so that first cycle, the first time someone connects, does a request response, and it sends down a table, because I'm old school. Plus I needed a table to put them in a tabular format. I just loop through and dump out each of those items, Microsoft, Google, etc. I put down the image and that button to vote for this, where we have the ID, traps that ID. So just a little bit of simple HTML and Razor code. So that's nothing, if you're an ASP.NET developer, that you're not doing already. Here in the script, start off, in this case, why not? All right, since we already have jQuery, I'll make a nice little ready function. Then inside of here, when I want to get to some hub, I just make a nice little variable, and here's where I do that $.connection dot and the name of the hub. Now, take a look at this. I'll make it bigger because somehow that's going to help. And then we'll take a look at this. One of these things just ain't like the other. All right, we may be noticing something, right? This is like really scratching in someone's brain right now, right? First time you see this, it's like, this is not right. Because from here, this is referencing this. Except this has a capital V, darn it, and this does not. And that's got to be annoying some of you really bad, because it annoyed me really bad, or I'm just really OCD, one of the two. So what happens here? C#, we tend to do that proper casing, right? Boat hub, capital V. JavaScript does hipster casing. So we start with the little v. And then the fight happens. We're C# and we want to use this casing, but we're JavaScript and we want this casing. All right, so your peanut butter gets into my chocolate. My chocolate gets into your peanut butter. Do you have to be that old to remember that? Yeah, okay. So here's what you can do. By default, in the land of JavaScript, use the hipster casing, right? In the land of C#, use whatever you want, hipster casing or not, but you're probably going to do it this way, right? Because it's C#. If this is going to drive you nuts, because it drives me nuts, here's what we can do. Come in here and put this hub name. Yay for attributes, hub names. I could actually call it my crazy hub. But now on the client, I have to come in here and do that. So that makes it match. You're forcing it. I actually learned to be okay with doing it the two ways. It took a while. If you go to therapy, you could get over it too. Took a while. But that's what you do. So there's hub name and the same for methods. So when you see this vote method here in JavaScript, oh, look it, there it is. So just remember the casing. That's such an easy, tiny thing to get burned on if you're not aware of it. So hub name, hub method name. So if you want to match up, if not, just remember the casing.
Is it just case insensitive?
Yes, no, it's case sensitive, which is why you would do that, right?
So some kind of translation is happening?
Well, in that proxy, there's all kind of stuff going on. It's probably been a year since I read the code. You could go look. But yeah, so we need to make it match so it knows what it is. Or just do the casing the two ways, either or. That way everybody, I guess, could get what they want, sort of. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right now what happens is the first time I update the database, it's a database dependency SignalR thing, and it just sends out the message appropriately for the first time. The second record I update, it becomes like 4 times, then 6 times, then it just hangs up actually.
Okay, I think what's happening if you're getting duplicate data, it's probably a matter of managing the connections as they come in, more so than it is the casing or anything like that. So it's probably that a connection is coming in, and you're getting connection, say, number 1, and then it comes in again, and it thinks it's a whole nother connection. All right, so it's something like that. Sounds like it's happening. You come up after the talk. It could work more about that, because it's not so much SignalR, I think. You just need to trap the IDs in there. So here, once I have that connection, then what I can do is actually just start calling code. Now, being that I'm using jQuery, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell the hub, I love chaining in here, so I could tell the hub to start. When it's done starting, that's my favorite phrase, when you're done starting, then we're going to wire up the button click. You can actually wire up the button click without the hub having started, but sometimes the click button, or yeah, the button will be wired. Someone may click it before the hub starts, and then it just doesn't do anything, or weird stuff happens. You won't get an error. I'd rather an error than weird stuff. And so you definitely want to make sure the hub is started. So for now, being that there's a hard dependency on jQuery, I find just sticking it in a ready function and wrapping any applicable click events or events that would call directly to the hub in that start done. After we move off of that, it'll be a little bit different. You may not need to do that. So in here, when anyone clicks that button, I'm calling the hub and telling it to vote. Now the syntax is just a tiny bit different, a little bit for clarity. So normally you would expect something like this, vote.vote, like a direct call. But this is JavaScript, so we have to be a little clear. So vote hub, we're definitely hitting the server, and that's where that little proxy, with that little hubs script thing, comes into play. That's where, actually, if you run, you should be able to see some of this. It's kind of cool. Let's go to references. Let's open this up. You sometimes see dynamic, cool things in Solution Explorer. So once it's running, oh, there we go. Whee! Fun, there we go. There's our hubs, other googly glop stuff that has to do with this. Yeah, I mean, you could go in there and look. There's some of my things. So if I go and I look in here, oh, look it. It's dynamic. So here's all that cool stuff happening. Code that I didn't have to write. Yes. So that's why we have this. So VoteHub.server, so it could pass through that proxy, figure out what it has to do. I don't have to figure it out. SignalR figures it out. Then we're good. And it calls vote, and it passes in whichever button I clicked. It goes over to the server, and we saw the server does the tabulation and then calls right back here to the client. Now, when it calls right back here to the client, it's calling that method called update vote results. So we were in the button click, but here is the update vote results function. And you see the syntax again is just a tiny bit different, nothing spectacularly weird or off, just a tiny bit, and it's only that. Again, I have my JavaScript reference to the hub, and instead of .server, we have .client. Now we see, oh, I see. Because what if I had a vote on here and on the client? You actually can. It's real fun for the maintenance developer when you do that. Just saying. Don't put that on your resume. But do it before you quit. It's a little pro tip. So here, update vote results. So I get to call right into that function here. And in proper JavaScript fashion, right after I tell it, this is my client definition called update vote results. And then here, it's a function. It accepts which one was voted for and how many votes it now has. That should probably say total vote, but naming, right? Right, those three hard things of computer science, right? Naming and one-off errors. It is really too early for this stuff. Yeah, I start right after I wake up too. It's awful. So here I just grab a span and stick however many votes are in that span. All right, that's all we're doing there. Just tallying that up. And then here's where if somebody joined in the on connection from before, all right, that one that was called join voting. So if I go back to the hub and we look here and I do the caller.join voting, all right, so that's where that is. All right. And then my own little, all right, so I can actually have my own function, not SignalR, just plain old JavaScript, but my SignalR code, SignalR JavaScript code calls it. And that just updates the UI. And this is what stops here at around 20-some. So we're talking less than 100 lines of code for this. I mean, it's not a huge program, but for less than 100 lines of code with a lot of white space and bad formatting, it's not bad. Right? One day I'll remember to reformat these between talks, but not today, obviously. So if I want to follow this through, run my debugging. We'll see it should stop off in the client once I click something. So now you can see all those proxies spun up, and I have the ID, which is button number 2. I continue and see it passed number 2 in. I'm tallying the votes. I'll break down here as well. All right, so we're ready now. We're ready to call the client. And here I am in the client, right? So direct, right? We're not going anywhere but direct, back and forth. And then in here, I'm just updating the UI. Which was that, Chrome or something? I don't know. IE, whatever. All right, so there, our one vote for Apple. So pretty cool. Now this is what I'm talking about when I say that one small library does, one thing and it excels at it. And you see what that is. Real-time connectivity. Now I'm doing it all in JavaScript because I'm a web person, but there is a .NET somewhere in here. I'll come back to that stuff in a second. There is a .NET client as well. So it could be WPF, WinForms, Windows Phone, Windows Store, any of the Windows desktop. But there's also the iOS and Android clients. So if you're using Xamarin or something, you can use those as well. Now, even though what we're doing in here is, we start off with that HTTP pipeline and handshake, and then we go, see ya, and we just open a pipeline. But then we go, oh crap, security. All right, now we'll play with ASP.NET a little more. So session and security. Session is the nope, 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 all the way to nopeville. Nope terrain, nopeville. Because we bypass ASP.NET. No session for you, 1 year. You don't get a context object. do something else. There is a lot of stuff you could do if you look at like the backplaning and scaling out stuff. Stuff you could do that I would not suggest that you normally do unless you need to put SignalR into an existing app and integrate it. Or you're just seriously academic and like to try every line of code you find, one of the two. Because you generally don't use this, but the question does come up once in a while. Because we do have a little bit of access to the HTTP pipeline, we can get to headers and query strings. Now, I did an MVC project here. So it was file new, MVC project. It's all web stuff. It's all new. But maybe I have web forms, because that is wildly popular, right? It's one of our most popular products that we have still. So if somebody has a web forms app, this works just as nice in web forms. You just do your NuGet again, get your Java or jQuery in there, and the same thing. You can have a hub in web forms. You just don't need an ASPX page, just a class instead, right? And your client. But because you're using web forms, you may need to tap into some of this stuff. All right, so if you do, there's how you would do it out of JavaScript. It's a little QS for query string you could get to. Also in a .NET connection, .NET client, if you wanted to use that, you can get to that. You could send extra data that way, which would be the equivalent of a query string, but say from WinForms instead. Also on the client, if we care about our users, I know at least management cares about the users, so they tell us to do this, right? If they can't connect, maybe we want to let them know. It's actually really annoying if you're on a phone and it doesn't tell you that it's disconnected, or there's connectivity issues. So this is a really nice thing to have. Even get connection slow. Usually you don't get that kind of thing. So if for some reason the transport can't quite negotiate something nice, you might get a connection slow, reconnecting, unconnecting, disconnecting. So it's all JavaScript. Now we'd still have the server ones, but on the JavaScript side, this way we could pop up a little message to the user about stuff. So the $.connection.hub, connection slow, and call my own little pop-up JavaScript or whatever it is. As far as security goes, we can play and integrate with existing authentication. This is probably the best part of it, is that you don't have to go do a whole new security framework, because that's often security frameworks, right? It's very deep and you have to be very precise. It's security that is kind of important. Irony, right? It's the thing that's usually not important to the users, right? They're not tech people and it's not their job to understand those implications. It's ours. So we can integrate SignalR into existing authentication. Just use ASP.NET Forms. So you could slap an authorize attribute on there. And that first handshake, it'll go and check and then sets it up for the pipeline. So it integrates nicely. And you don't have to go find some, weird library or something that you're a little skeptical about. We have the same forms authentication. And then also, if you're integrating into web forms or MVC, you don't have to rip out your security and put something in, which would just be like no reason to upgrade if you had to do that. Yeah.
What about like SSL? I mean, you're not going to be able to sit on top of that layer. So how do you achieve end-to-end?
You can. It's just going to be you may have some lag, right? Because of SSL slows things down, right? As real time as you try to get, that can happen. There are a couple other things you can do to set up and configure SSL. It's kind of out of the scope of here, but I can point you to stuff. So that's kind of tokens, and it does all this stuff. This is all what ASP.NET does with SignalR. Gives you a token, you get the connection ID, saves everything. Really, all we need to know is the developer. For like standard issue cases, we can use forms authentication. So authorize roles. Like, don't do the users, but you can, right? I like to do it by the grouper role. It's a little bit easier generally, right, but it works the same. Then in the startup, don't forget to tell it you're actually going to use authentication or require it. So after you do the map SignalR, And Map SignalR is overloaded, so there are other goodies in here that you can customize. Actually, some of that will come into here too. You can set up some SSL in here. But you just tell it, take your hub pipeline and authenticate, force it. Then the authorize tag will actually force people to authorize. Comment that out or don't have it in there, and it's same as my demo, no authorization. All right. If we need to get to any of it, once we do that, then we get the good old user.identity stuff from forms, like the standard stuff that you would normally get on the server side. Ooh, just a couple minutes left. So, oh, good thing, just time for deployment. So, deployment. You may have noticed Azure's kind of easy to deploy to. Then the portal changes on you, but still easy to deploy. So what we want to do is, it depends, like not everybody just has the cloud or gets to deploy to Azure, but if you can, Visual Studio has some awesome publishing tools in it. So all you need to do usually is come in here and do a publish, and it will allow you to set up these profiles where you can push to an Azure website. So that's what I did. But a lot of people, I remember like years I've deployed FTP, FileZilla. It's like one of my favorite little things. If you work with a web host, you're probably doing that, right? FTP or something. That's fine. It doesn't really matter where you deploy it. All you do is deploy it exactly like you would any ASP.NET MVC website or ASP.NET site. Right? So just deploy your server-side code like you would, and you're good. The only thing we want to make note of is you do have to make sure that the server has WebSockets enabled. Now, if you're on Azure, by default, it's not enabled, right? We don't want extra stuff enabled, taking up cycles or security holes. And we want to make sure that version 4.5 is enabled. And that should be if you're on Azure. There's a nice little link if you have multiple Azure services or service instances and you need to scale out a little bit, right? And do some of the web scaling. There's a nice little link there. But you do need to make sure that the server actually supports WebSockets as well. Once the server does, then it does transport negotiation for the clients. You don't need to worry about that. Just make sure that it supports WebSockets on the server. I don't even know why I have a picture of the Azure portal. It's in there. Look for something called WebSockets, turn it on. It's going to look different than this looks. Right? And then when you log on 5 minutes later, it's going to look different again. So, right? It's the Azure portal. That's what it does. So, but just make sure, it doesn't matter. Your host, call up your host, or if they allow you to manage WebSockets yourself, they don't all. Sometimes you actually have to call them and ask, please, can I have WebSockets? So if that's the case, fine, but you do have to do that. At least on the server, it'll manage the clients for you. So this is your end-to-end. So we should be able to go out, download the packages, make our hubs, make a little bit of script, and then from here, there's a bunch of links in here where you can go and get, if you need to do things like server farms and scaling and big data center stuff. Obviously, we can't get to that in an hour and 15. You can do it if we need to do that. It supports all of that stuff. So again, that's why this is one of my favorites, right? Small library that does this job really darn good. So that's basically it. And I guess perfect timing, right? Yes, right on the dot. So thank you. I have more talks today. If you could take the cheesy jokes all day. So thanks for coming.